From the sterile darkness of space, our planet looks back at us as a living, breathing entity. We see the familiar swirls of white cloud, the deep blue of the oceans, and the shifting greens and browns of continents. But then, as our gaze drifts over the vast, monochromatic expanse of the Sahara Desert, we see something impossible. It is a feature so distinct, so enormous, and so seemingly artificial it arrests the senses. A perfect, 25-mile-wide set of concentric rings, like a colossal bullseye carved into the earth, staring back at the cosmos. This is the Rikhat structure, known to astronauts since the dawn of the space age as the Eye of the Sahara. Science, in its quest for rational answers, has given this marvel a name and a history. Geologists assure us it is entirely natural. It's not an impact crater. There is no evidence of the expected shock, melt, or debris. Instead, they label it a geologic dome, a process that began over 100 million years ago. Imagine a massive bubble of molten rock pushing up from deep within the earth, warping the flat layers of crust above it, like a blister. Then, for tens of millions of years, wind and water went to work, scouring away the top of this dome. The different rock types, some hard, some soft, eroded at different rates, leaving behind the stunning concentric rings we see today. It is a tidy, elegant, and entirely plausible explanation. This is the story you will find in every textbook and geological paper. Case closed. The Eye is a natural masterpiece, a slow-motion sculpture carved by erosion, a testament to the random, beautiful power of deep time. We are meant to file it away next to the Grand Canyon or the Giant's Causeway, as just another wonder of the world. But a nagging, persistent question remains. Why does this explanation, as rational as it is, feel so incomplete? What if our instinct, our powerful, pattern-seeking human brain, isn't being fooled this time? What if we are looking not at a random geological feature, but at a blueprint? This is the starting point for one of the most audacious and controversial ideas in modern exploration. The hypothesis is not that humans built this 25-mile-wide structure. That would be impossible. The hypothesis is that they found it. What if a sophisticated, intelligent, and now vanished civilization stumbled upon this perfect natural fortress, nestled in a fertile landscape? What if they recognized its unique, concentric ring topography and built their capital city within its protective rings? The objections are immediate and obvious. A grand capital in the middle of the modern Sahara? It is one of the most inhospitable, water-starved places on the planet. But this is the first error of our investigation, judging the deep past by the standards of the present. The Earth itself is not a static object. We are not looking for a civilization that existed last Tuesday. We are hunting for a culture that may have thrived over 10,000 years ago. And the science is clear on one thing. 10,000 years ago, this was not a desert. It was the Green Sahara, a lush, vibrant landscape of grasslands, massive rivers, and megalakes, teeming with life. There is only one story in all of human mythology that matches this description. It is a name so loaded with fantasy and speculation that it is often dismissed by serious academics before the conversation even begins. Atlantis. The story, first recorded by the Greek philosopher Plato, describes a powerful, ancient empire that existed before our time. He gave precise, detailed descriptions of its capital. A city built in a series of perfect, concentric rings, 3 of water and 2 of land. He gave its measurements, described its location relative to the sea and a ring of mountains, and he told of its cataclysmic end, swallowed by the earth in a single terrible day and night. For 2 millennia, the world has treated Plato's story as a simple allegory, a philosopher's thought experiment. Treasure hunters have scoured the globe for a sunken island, from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean, and found nothing. But what if they were all looking for the wrong thing? What if the story was not a myth but a memory? A garbled, fragmented, but fundamentally true piece of history, passed down over thousands of years. What if the capital of Atlantis was never an island that sank? What if it was a city in a fertile land that died? A city that wasn't lost to water, but to sand? This is the question at the heart of our investigation. It is a hypothesis so bold, it demands an extraordinary level of proof. We are not here to sell you a fantasy. We are here to follow the data wherever it leads. We will compare Plato's 2,400-year-old text as a potential blueprint against the modern high-resolution satellite data of a real-world location. We will dive into the geology, the archaeology, the climate models, and the strange, lingering whispers of a golden age that appear in cultures all over the world. Is the Eye of the Sahara a breathtaking geological accident and nothing more? Or is it the most important ancient ruin on the planet, the capital of a prehistoric empire, hiding in plain sight? Before we can journey to the edges of what is possible, we must first ground ourselves in the facts. We must honor the official story, because the mainstream scientific explanation for the Eye of the Sahara is not a guess. It is the product of decades of rigorous, peer-reviewed study. It is a compelling narrative of deep time and forces so vast they are almost beyond human comprehension. This is the story of the Rickhat structure as told not by mystics, but by geologists. And in this story, there is no room for human hands. The narrative begins over 100 million years ago, in the Cretaceous period. Deep beneath the surface of what was then a part of the supercontinent Gondwana, a massive plume of molten rock or magma began to rise. It did not erupt in a violent volcano. Instead, it pushed relentlessly upward, causing the flat layers of sedimentary rock above it to swell into a giant, miles-wide dome, like a slow-motion blister forming on the skin of the Earth. This domal uplift was the first act in a geological play of immense proportions. For tens of millions of years, this dome sat, a hidden tension in the crust. Then, the forces of erosion began their methodical, patient work. Wind and water, in cycles of wet and dry that spanned epochs, began to slice the top off this dome. This unroofing process slowly peeled back the layers of rock, one by one, like the skin of an onion. What we see today from orbit is not something built up from the ground, but something worn down to its very core. We are looking at the exposed heart of that 100-million-year-old blister. But why the perfect rings? This, the geologists explain, is the masterstroke of differential erosion. The dome was not made of one uniform material. It was a sandwich of different rock layers, extremely hard, resilient quartzite and softer, more easily weathered volcanic and igneous rocks. As the elements scoured the surface, the softer rocks were carried away, carved into valleys. The harder quartzite layers resisted, remaining as the high, circular ridges we see today. The rings are not walls. They are the surviving, concentric skeleton of a multi-layered geological formation. This elegant explanation also shuts down the most common alternative theory: an asteroid impact. A cosmic collision capable of creating a 25-mile-wide scar would leave unmistakable fingerprints. It would generate pressures and temperatures high enough to instantly vaporize rock, creating glassy tektites and shocked quartz, minerals with a fractured internal structure. Despite decades of sampling within the Eye, not one piece of this definitive impact evidence has ever been found. The geology is clear. It was a slow, terrestrial process, not a sudden, celestial one. This geological case is the first barrier to the Atlantis hypothesis. The second is the environment itself. Today, the Rickhat structure sits within the Mauritanian Sahara, one of the most hostile and uninhabitable regions on the planet. It is a hyper-arid desert, a realm of scorched rock and shifting dunes where life barely clings on. The idea of any grand civilization, let alone a maritime empire, centering its entire culture in this desolate void seems not just improbable, but a complete fantasy. Logically, it's a non-starter. The third and final pillar of the official story is, for many, the most conclusive: the archaeology. What human artifacts have we found inside the Eye? If it was a bustling capital, we would expect to find the ruins of buildings, foundations, pottery, metalwork, art, or graves. The ground should be littered with the refuse of a complex society. Instead, the only human traces ever found are simple, Acheulean stone tools. These are primitive, teardrop-shaped hand axes, chipped from local quartzite. These tools are not the mark of a great empire. They are the characteristic tools of Homo erectus and other early hominids, dating back not 12,000 years, but hundreds of thousands of years. This creates an almost comical disconnect. We have a structure that looks like a futuristic blueprint, but the only human calling cards are from the deep, deep Stone Age. For mainstream science, the conclusion is inescapable. Early hunter-gatherers simply passed through this striking natural formation, perhaps using it as a landmark while they hunted. So the case is closed. The geology is natural. The environment is impossible. The human evidence is from the wrong species and the wrong time. The fortress of the official story seems impenetrable. It is a story of a random, beautiful geological accident. And yet, the structure is still there. It still perfectly matches Plato's description. The sheer, astounding coincidence of it all hangs in the air, a defiant mystery. This is the central conflict of our investigation. Our eyes see a blueprint, but the data insists it's an accident. For our journey to continue, we must find a crack in this fortress. The fortress of the official story, built on geology and archaeology, appears unshakable. The rock is 100 million years old. The tools are primitive. The environment is a lifeless hell. Any rational investigation should, by all accounts, end right here. But this is precisely where our investigation begins, because the official story has two critical, missing chapters. And the first one doesn't come from a mystic scroll, but from peer-reviewed climate science. The first and most powerful objection, the hostile environment, is built on a simple, flawed assumption that the desert we see today is the desert that always was. This is profoundly wrong. The Earth, we must remember, is not a static museum. It is a living, dynamic system that breathes and changes on vast timescales. We now know with absolute scientific certainty about the African humid period. This was a climatic era, lasting from approximately 11,000 years ago down to about 5,000 years ago. During this window, a slight wobble in the Earth's orbit shifted the powerful African monsoons hundreds of miles north. The effect was dramatic. The Sahara as we know it vanished. It was, for thousands of years, a green, fertile, and vibrant landscape. We are not speculating. Core samples drilled from ancient lake beds, geological surveys of massive, now dry river systems, and pollen data confirm it. This was a land of grasslands, savanna, and forests, teeming with hippos, giraffes, elephants, and crocodiles. The rock art found at sites like Tassili Eniger famously depicts not a desert, but a paradise, with figures swimming and herding cattle. This fertile period, this green Sahara, aligns perfectly with the time frame for a potential high civilization, one that rose, flourished, and fell, just before the climate shifted back and the sands returned to reclaim the land. So we have established a when and a where, a habitable time and a habitable place. This neutralizes the first great objection. Now we must turn to the second missing chapter, the blueprint. For this, we must look at a text that is, for many, the most controversial document in history. It is a story so old, so tantalizing, that it has been dismissed as pure fantasy. Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. Written around 360 BCE, Plato tells the story of a mighty, advanced maritime empire that existed 9,000 years before his time, which would place its fall at exactly the same 11,600 year ago mark we keep encountering. We must treat this not as a myth, but as a potential historical fragment, a garbled survivor's testimony passed down through generations. Let us ignore, for a moment, the tales of gods and demigods, and focus only on the physical, topographical description of the capital city of Atlantis. Plato describes, with obsessive detail, a city built in a series of perfect, concentric rings, 2 of land and 3 of water. He states that at its very center was a small island, upon which sat the citadel. He says the city was sheltered by lofty mountains to the north, and that it opened to the sea via a great canal to the south. For 2 millennia, this description has been homeless. No known place on Earth, ancient or modern, has ever matched this unique, concentric design. It was dismissed as a philosopher's invention, until we left the planet, until we looked down from orbit, and the eye of the Sahara stared back at us. This is the aha moment. The visual correlation is so immediate, so shocking, it borders on the absurd. You do not need to be an archaeologist to see it. It is a direct one-to-one match. The central island, the concentric rings of land, the circular moats where water once flowed. And the description continues to align. The Rickhat structure is indeed ringed by high ground and mountains to the north, which would have shielded it from the harsh desert winds. And most critically, topographical analysis using modern satellite radar reveals what is unmistakably a fossilized river channel. It runs directly from the southern edge of the structure, in a straight line, down towards the area that would have been the ancient coastline, before the ice caps melted and the sea levels rose. It is exactly where Plato's Great Canal to the sea would be. But it is the final piece of data that solidifies the connection beyond mere coincidence. Plato gave dimensions. He stated that the diameter of the central city itself was 127 stadia. This ancient Greek measurement has been debated, but the most common academic conversion places it at approximately 23.5 kilometers, or 14.6 miles. When we measure the Rickhat structure, its full outermost ring is nearly 25 miles wide. But if we measure the inner, most defined, most city-like set of rings, its diameter is 23.5 kilometers. The numbers are not just close. They are an exact, perfect match. So we are left with a staggering, undeniable set of correlations. A geologic structure 100 million years old that perfectly matches the description of a mythical city recorded 2,400 years ago, which was said to have existed 9,000 years before that, in a place that just happened to be a fertile paradise at that exact time. How did Plato so perfectly describe a feature he could not possibly have seen? A feature we only truly discovered from space? Is this the most profound coincidence in human history? Or are we looking at the blueprint of a lost world? The blueprint is uncanny. The location, once a paradise, is viable. The timeline aligns. But this alignment introduces the second, more terrifying half of Plato's story, the city's demise. Plato states that this empire, in its arrogance, was destroyed in a single terrible day and night. For millennia, this has been the most mythic, unbelievable part of the tale. Sounds like poetry, not history. What known force of nature could possibly obliterate an advanced, continent-spanning civilization so quickly and so completely that it would be almost entirely forgotten? For a long time, there was no credible answer. But in just the last few decades, a new and terrifying culprit has emerged from the geological record. We see it in ice cores, in soot layers, and in the fossil record of mass extinctions. This event is called the Younger Dryas, a catastrophic climate change event that began, with shocking abruptness, around 12,800 years ago. Just as the Earth was peacefully warming from the last ice age, something plunged it back into a 1,000-year-long deep freeze. The data is clear. This was not a slow, natural cycle. A growing and powerful body of evidence, though still controversial, now points to a cosmic culprit, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. This theory posits that the Earth, around 12,800 years ago, passed through the debris field of a disintegrating comet. The resulting impacts, or atmospheric airbursts, would have been unimaginable. They would have struck the great ice sheets of North America, instantly vaporizing billions of tons of ice, setting entire continents ablaze, and sending a plume of soot, platinum, and meltwater around the globe. This was a true global great filter. This single catastrophic event provides a chilling, scientific mechanism for every part of Plato's story. It provides the fire from the heavens. It provides the great flood, not from rain, but from a sudden, cataclysmic meltwater pulse that would have raised sea levels and inundated coastlines around the world. This is the event that could wipe a maritime civilization off the map. It also, perhaps, provides the singular, traumatic origin for the more than 500 great flood myths that are shared by nearly every culture on Earth, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the legends of the Hopi. This brings us back to the most difficult evidence within the eye of the Sahara itself, those primitive Acheulean stone tools. Mainstream archaeology holds them up as the final, definitive proof that no advanced civilization ever existed here. Case closed. But the Younger Dryas cataclysm offers a different, and far more tragic interpretation. What if we have the timeline completely backward? What if the tools are not from the builders? What if they are from the survivors? Imagine a global society, advanced in navigation, architecture, and organization, suddenly shattered by a cosmic impact. Their supply chains, their knowledge base, their social structure, all gone in an instant. The few who survived would be thrown back into a brutal, post-apocalyptic dark age. They would scavenge in the ruins of their own world, forced to resort to the most basic human technology to survive. Chipping rocks to hunt, just as their distant ancestors had. These primitive tools, far from disproving a lost civilization, might be the most poignant evidence for its sudden and total collapse. If this cataclysm was global, and if this was a mother culture, we should find other, impossible breadcrumbs from this exact time period. For decades, we were taught civilization began with the Sumerians around 6,000 years ago. This entire, comfortable timeline was obliterated by the discovery of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. It is a stunning, sophisticated complex of massive, T-shaped megalithic pillars, carved with intricate, high-relief art, and organized with clear astronomical alignments. It is a feat of engineering that requires a level of planning, organization, and symbolic thought we did not believe hunter-gatherers possessed. The most earth-shattering fact about Göbekli Tepe is its age. Carbon dating confirms it was constructed around 9,600 BCE, or 11,600 years ago. This is precisely the date Plato gives for the fall of Atlantis. It was built immediately after the Younger Dryas cataclysm. Mainstream archaeology has no satisfying explanation for it. But within our hypothesis, it makes perfect, chilling sense. Was this a colony? An outpost? Was it, perhaps, a deliberate effort by the survivors to preserve their ancestral knowledge? A library in stone, built by a people who had just watched their world drown? So, the circumstantial case builds. We have a mechanism for destruction in the Younger Dryas impact. We have a powerful recontextualization for the primitive tools. And we have contemporary, impossible sites like Göbekli Tepe proving, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that a highly organized, megalithic, and astronomically aware culture did exist in this lost epoch. The echoes are no longer faint. They are beginning to form a clear, coherent, and profoundly disturbing picture of a human story that is far, far older than we have ever been told. We have built a powerful, compelling, and seductive case. The alignment of the map, the myth, the climate data, and the timeline is breathtaking. Feels true. And that is precisely why, at this exact moment, we must become our own greatest skeptics. An investigation that is not willing to rigorously try and destroy its own hypothesis is not an investigation at all. It is simply a search for validation. So, we must now, in good faith, put the entire Atlantis hypothesis on trial and call its most formidable witnesses. The prosecution's first witness is the archaeologist, and their opening question is devastatingly simple. Where is the city? A capital city, home to a thalassocratic empire for millennia, is not just a set of outlines. It is a place of living. It means foundations, buildings, temples, docks, and harbors. More than that, it means refuse. Every civilization in history has left behind its trash. We should be finding literal mountains of pottery shards, the plastic of the ancient world. We should find graves, statues, tools, collapsed columns, and the distinct chemical signatures of agriculture, industry, and metalworking. The answer from the field? An echoing silence. The Rickhat structure is, by all accounts, geologically pristine. The only human artifacts ever found are those simple Paleolithic hand axes. There is not one single carved block, not one foundation stone, not one shard of Atlantean pottery. The silence from the ground is deafening. The hypothesis asks us to believe that a cataclysm 12,000 years ago was so total, so perfect, that it erased every single trace of a complex megalithic society. While leaving the 100-million-year-old rock formation it was built on perfectly recognizably intact. This leads to the central logical paradox of the entire theory. The hypothesis attempts to have it both ways, claiming the structure is both a 100-million-year-old natural formation and a 12,000-year-old city. This is what's known in logic as an unfalsifiable claim. It brilliantly sidesteps the impossible geology by saying humans just settled it. But this convenience is a critical weakness. It means any strange natural formation on Earth, from a canyon to a mountain range, could be a lost city if we simply claim all the hard evidence was washed away. It's an argument that cannot be disproven, and therefore it can never truly be proven. We must also, with a cold eye, re-examine the poetic idea that the primitive tools belong to devolved survivors. While it's a tragic and compelling narrative, it is an argument made from pure speculation, with zero supporting evidence. The principle of Occam's razor, which states the simplest explanation is usually the correct one, must apply. What is simpler? That an advanced civilization was destroyed and its survivors, in their grief, perfectly mimicked the tool-making of Homo erectus from 1,000,000 years prior. Or that Stone Age hunter-gatherers, over millennia, passed through a striking natural landmark and left their tools behind? The evidence objectively points to the latter. Finally, we must confront our own minds. We must address the profound, uncomfortable reality of confirmation bias. How perfect is the match with Plato, really? We latch onto the concentric rings because the visual from space is so powerful. But in doing so, are we cherry-picking the data? Plato also describes a city teeming with elephants, 2 harvests a year, and exotic alloys like orichalcum. He also, most famously, describes the city as an island that sank beneath the sea. The Saharan location does not fit the sinking island narrative. Are we guilty of forcing the evidence to fit the theory, instead of letting the theory emerge from the evidence? This is the uncomfortable truth. We want to believe. The myth of a lost golden age is perhaps the most powerful story in our collective consciousness. We are a species with a profound sense of amnesia, and the idea that we were more than we are, that we come from something grand and ancient, speaks to a deep spiritual longing. It's a story that gives us context and meaning in a vast, indifferent universe. But is it true? Is our desire for this to be Atlantis so strong that we are projecting a city onto a place where no city ever stood? So we are forced to look at the eye of the Sahara one last time. We must strip away the romantic overlays, the heroic narratives, and the convenient timelines. What are we left with? We are left with rocks. We are left with 100 million years of slow, patient, differential erosion. We are left with a geological wonder that is breathtaking on its own terms, without needing to be a lost city. The skeptic's case is powerful. It is grounded, it is rational, and it is, by all present evidence, correct. The hypothesis is beautiful, perhaps the most beautiful story ever told. But the evidence is just not there. We have reached the end of our journey. We have followed the evidence from the cold, orbital perspective of space, down to the 100-million-year-old bedrock, and through the cryptic 2,400-year-old pages of Plato. We must now, at last, confront the central question. Was the Eye of the Sahara the capital of a lost, prehistoric empire? The hard, physical, archaeological evidence demands an honest answer. Based on the lack of a single carved stone, a single foundation, or a single artifact of a high civilization, the answer, for now, must be no. The silence from the ground is deafening. The fortress of mainstream geology and archaeology, though battered, still stands. And yet, to walk away now, to label this case closed, would be an act of profound intellectual blindness. It would be to ignore the mystery that set us on this path. We are left with the single, haunting, and utterly unexplained fact that hangs in the air: the coincidence. How did Plato, in 360 BCE, describe with mathematical precision the concentric rings, the layout, the central island, the opening to the south, and the very measurements, a 100-million-year-old geologic feature he could not possibly have seen? A feature we only truly saw when we left the planet. This is not a minor detail. It is a profound, gaping hole in our understanding of the past. It is a signal, an echo, that refuses to be silenced by our convenient timelines. This paradox suggests that perhaps we have been asking the wrong question all along. Perhaps the true value of the Richat structure is not as a physical ground zero for Atlantis. Perhaps its purpose is something far more important: to serve as a symbol, a message, and a warning that we are only now, in this precarious modern age, beginning to understand. We do not need to believe in a mythical lost city to understand the warning. The science gives us its own proven story of a paradise lost. The African humid period is not a hypothesis. It is a fact. We know with absolute certainty that this now desolate wasteland was once a green, vibrant, and fertile world of lakes, rivers, and life. And we know with equal certainty that it died, collapsed into a hyper-arid hell. The Earth itself is telling us that a paradise can be lost, that an entire ecosystem can be wiped from the map. This is not a legend. It is a precedent. The story of that lost world, the Green Sahara, is the scientific bedrock. The legend of Atlantis is its philosophical twin. It is the human story, the memory of a civilization that grew too arrogant, too powerful, and was extinguished in a single day and night. It is the ultimate cautionary tale, a myth that resonates not just because it's a good story, but perhaps because it is a memory of a genuine cataclysm, like the Younger Dryas, that served as a great filter for human civilization, leaving only scattered survivors to tell the tale of the world that came before. This, then, is the true power of the Eye of the Sahara. It is a perfect convergence. It is a cosmic mirror. When we look down upon that 25-mile-wide structure, we are not just looking at rock and sand. We see the proven fragility of our climate in the ghost of the Green Sahara. We see the mythic terror of a sudden collapse, a reminder that our own technological society is not guaranteed to last forever. And in its uncanny, blueprint-like form, we see the ghost of ourselves, a civilization so advanced it feels both ancient and futuristic. In the end, it almost doesn't matter whether a single human ever laid a single stone there. The Rickhat structure is a Rorschach test for our species. It is the Earth itself holding up a mirror to our precarious moment in history. The story of a great hubristic civilization that ignored the warnings and was wiped from the face of the planet. That story resonates so deeply, not because it might be our past, but because we are terrified it might be our future. What we see in that eye, staring back at us from the void, is a reflection. It is an echo of a forgotten age, perhaps, but it is also a prophecy. It forces us to ask the ultimate question. We, who have built our own rings of civilization, who have bent the planet to our will, and who now face our own self-inflicted climatic and existential crises, have we, too, begun to lose our way? And will anyone be left to tell our story?